Standing in my scorched apartment hallway at 3 in the morning, clutching my rescued laptop while smoke alarms wailed behind me, I thought the worst part of this nightmare was over. Then I called my mother. After 5 years of sending her over $200,000 to keep our family afloat, after sacrificing my own dreams to pay their bills, she looked me straight in the eye when I arrived, seeking shelter, and said the words that shattered everything I believed about unconditional love. The piercing shriek of my fire detector ripped me from sleep at exactly 2:47 in the morning. I bolted upright in my Boston apartment, instantly smelling the acrid smoke seeping under my bedroom door. The hallway glowed orange through the gap beneath the frame, and I knew I had seconds to escape. I grabbed my laptop from the nightstand, snatched my phone from its charger, and crawled toward the window in my pajamas. The building's ancient heating system had finally betrayed us all. Sparks from corroded electrical wiring had ignited the basement, and flames were climbing through the walls like hungry serpents seeking prey. Fire trucks arrived as I stood barefoot on Commonwealth Avenue, watching orange tongues devour my home through broken windows. The bitter February wind cut through my thin cotton sleepwear, but the cold barely registered against my shock. 3 floors of the converted brownstone were engulfed, and my 3rd-floor unit sat directly in the path of destruction. Captain Rodriguez from the Boston Fire Department approached me around dawn, his weathered face grim with exhaustion. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. The entire structure is compromised. Nobody's going back inside for at least 72 hours, and frankly, there won't be much left to salvage." My insurance adjuster couldn't assess the damage for 48 hours minimum. The Red Cross offered a voucher for 1 night at a nearby motel, but after that, I'd need somewhere to stay while rebuilding my entire life. Standing there in my pajamas with my laptop clutched against my chest, I felt more vulnerable than I'd ever experienced. Without thinking, I dialed my mother Barbara's number in Springfield. She'd always been there during childhood emergencies. When I broke my arm at age 8 when I got sick at summer camp, when my college boyfriend broke my heart, she dropped everything to help. Surely this qualified as the kind of crisis where family rallied together. The phone rang 4 times before her groggy voice answered. "Alicia, do you know what time it is?" "Mom, there was a fire. My apartment building caught fire. I lost everything." Silence stretched across the line for nearly 10 seconds. Then Barbara's voice returned sharp with irritation rather than concern. "Well, what do you want me to do about it? I was sleeping." My heart sank into my stomach. After 5 years of sending her thousands of dollars every single month, after prioritizing her financial needs over my own comfort and security, her first response wasn't sympathy or an immediate invitation home. It was annoyance at being disturbed. "I need somewhere to stay while I figure this out," I said quietly. "That's what insurance is for, Alicia. You're an adult now." The line went dead, leaving me standing on the sidewalk as the sun rose over the smoldering ruins of everything I owned. The drive from Boston to Springfield gave me 90 minutes to contemplate the twisted mathematics of my relationship with my family. As my Honda Civic hummed along Interstate 90, memories flooded back of how this financial arrangement had consumed 5 years of my life. It started when I turned 27 and landed my dream job at Brand Forward Agency as a senior marketing coordinator. After years of struggling through college and entry-level positions, I finally earned enough to envision a real future. I planned to save for a house down payment, maybe take that European vacation I'd always postponed, build the kind of life I'd worked so hard to achieve. Then the phone calls began. My father, Robert, had lost his construction supervisor position when the housing market contracted. At 54, he struggled to find equivalent work, and unemployment benefits barely covered basics. My brother Tyler needed tuition for welding certification at Springfield Technical Community College. My sister Emma required surgery for a deviated septum that insurance only partially covered. But the most urgent crisis was Barbara facing foreclosure on our childhood home. The adjustable rate mortgage had reset to a payment she couldn't manage on her retail salary from Macy's. She called me crying, explaining that losing the house would destroy our family's foundation. "I know you're doing well now," she'd said through tears. "Could you maybe help out temporarily just until Dad finds work again?" Temporarily. That word echoed in my mind as I merged onto the Massachusetts Turnpike. I started with $2,000 monthly to cover their mortgage shortfall. Within 6 months, Tyler's school expenses pushed my contribution to $2,500. Emma's surgery complications required additional procedures, bumping my monthly support to $3,000. Every time I considered reducing the amount, another emergency materialized. Dad's truck needed transmission repair to maintain his job search. Barbara required dental work that couldn't wait. Tyler's certification program extended longer than expected. Emma faced unexpected complications requiring physical therapy. Each crisis felt legitimate, each request reasonable in isolation. But the cumulative impact devastated my personal finances. I canceled my planned vacation to Ireland, explaining to disappointed friends that work was too busy. I postponed house hunting, claiming I wanted to save more for a larger down payment. I drove my 12-year-old Honda past its expected lifespan, joking that I was being environmentally conscious by avoiding unnecessary consumption. The truth was more painful. I was financing my family's stability while denying myself basic comforts. I bought generic groceries to stretch my food budget. I wore the same professional wardrobe for 3 years straight, claiming I preferred classic styles over trendy fashion. I lived in a studio apartment far longer than necessary, telling people I enjoyed minimalist living. Meanwhile, my family's lifestyle improved dramatically. They upgraded their cable package, installed central air conditioning, and renovated their kitchen. Tyler bought expensive welding equipment beyond his course requirements. Emma splurged on cosmetic procedures that went far beyond medical necessity. But I convinced myself this sacrifice was temporary. Dad would find stable employment soon. Tyler would graduate and contribute to household expenses. Emma would recover and return to work full-time. The family would recognize my generosity and gradually reduce their dependence on my financial support. Instead, my contributions became their new normal. The temporary assistance transformed into permanent expectation. What began as emergency relief evolved into an assumed entitlement to my earnings. As I exited the highway toward Springfield, I calculated the staggering total in my head, 62 months of escalating payments that now averaged nearly $3,000 monthly. Conservative estimates put my total contribution at well over $200,000. $200,000 I could have used for my own home, my own security, my own future. Yet when I needed them most, when fire had stripped away everything I'd worked to build, my mother's first response was irritation at being inconvenienced by my emergency. The mathematical absurdity of the situation hit me like a physical blow. I'd given them the equivalent of a house down payment, and they couldn't offer me a couch for a few nights. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me as I drove toward the home my money had saved from foreclosure, hoping for temporary shelter from the woman who'd never once thanked me for my sacrifices. Turning onto Maple Street felt like traveling back in time, except my childhood neighborhood had undergone a dramatic transformation that my bank account had inadvertently funded. The modest ranch house where I'd grown up now boasted professional landscaping with decorative stones and flowering shrubs that must have cost thousands. Fresh forest green shutters framed sparkling clean windows, and the driveway had been resurfaced with smooth asphalt that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. I parked behind a pristine red Chevrolet Silverado that I didn't recognize, wondering if Dad had finally found stable work and purchased a new vehicle. Hope flickered in my chest that maybe the family's finances had stabilized enough that they'd no longer need my monthly contributions. The front door opened before I could knock, revealing Barbara in a silk blouse I'd never seen before. Her hair had been professionally styled and colored, eliminating the gray streaks that had worried her for years. She looked well-rested and healthy, clearly benefiting from reduced financial stress. "Alicia, what are you doing here?" she asked, blocking the doorway instead of inviting me inside. "I told you about the fire. I need somewhere to stay while I sort things out with insurance." Barbara's expression shifted from confusion to mild annoyance. Oh, right, the apartment thing. The apartment thing. 5 years of supporting her family and my catastrophic displacement warranted dismissal as the apartment thing. She stepped aside reluctantly, allowing me to enter the living room I remembered from childhood visits. Except this wasn't the same space at all. A massive flat-screen television dominated one wall connected to what appeared to be a premium sound system. The old furniture had been replaced with a leather sectional sofa and matching recliners. Hardwood floors gleamed with professional refinishing and expensive-looking artwork hung in frames that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. A man I didn't recognize sat in one of the recliner's feet propped up on an ottoman, sipping coffee from an elaborate espresso machine positioned on a granite kitchen counter, visible through the archway. He appeared to be in his mid-50s with graying hair and the soft physique of someone who'd never missed many meals. "Frank, this is my daughter Alicia," Barbara said with obvious reluctance. "Alicia, this is Frank." Frank raised his coffee mug in a casual greeting, but didn't stand or extend his hand. "Heard about the fire on the news. Rough break." I waited for Barbara to explain Frank's presence or offer basic hospitality like coffee or a place to sit. Instead, she remained standing by the door, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable with my unexpected arrival. "So you need a place to crash?" she asked, making it sound like I was a college friend seeking a party weekend accommodation. "Temporarily, yes, until I can find a new apartment and replace my belongings." Barbara sighed heavily, the same exasperated sound she'd made throughout my teenage years when I'd requested rides to school activities or help with homework. "This isn't a shelter, Alicia. You're 32 years old. Figure it out." The words hit me like cold water. I stood in the living room that my monthly payments had prevented from foreclosure, surrounded by luxury items my financial support had made possible, while my mother refused me basic emergency assistance. Frank nodded approvingly from his recliner. "Barbara's right. You've got to be self-sufficient at your age." Self-sufficient. The man lounging in furniture I'd helped purchase in a house I'd saved from bank repossession was lecturing me about self-sufficiency while drinking coffee from a machine my sacrifices had funded. "I understand being independent," I said carefully, "but this is a genuine emergency. I lost everything in the fire." "That's what renter's insurance is for," Barbara replied curtly. "You should have planned better." Should have planned better. After 5 years of planning my entire budget around their needs, after sacrificing my own emergency fund to cover their crises, I should have planned better. I glanced around the renovated room again, calculating the cost of improvements visible just in this space. The flooring alone probably cost $8,000. The entertainment system easily ran $4,000. The furniture ensemble likely approached $6,000. Conservative estimates suggested $15,000 in upgrades to just the living room. $15,000 represented 5 months of my contributions. 5 months of eating ramen noodles and driving a car with questionable brakes so they could enjoy granite countertops and premium cable packages. "I see you've made some improvements to the house," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Frank's been helping with renovations," Barbara said proudly. "He's got wonderful taste in home design." Frank beamed from his recliner, clearly pleased with the recognition. "Just trying to make the place more comfortable." Comfortable. They'd made the place more comfortable using money I'd sent for basic survival needs, while I'd lived uncomfortably for years to ensure they could meet their obligations. "Mom, I've been supporting this family financially for 5 years," I said quietly. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for temporary help during an actual emergency." "And we appreciate what you've done," she replied with the tone of someone discussing a pleasant but unnecessary gift. "But that doesn't mean we owe you free housing whenever you have problems." Free housing, in the home I'd literally saved from foreclosure. Frank set down his coffee mug and leaned forward. "Look, Alicia, we all face setbacks. The key is handling them independently instead of running home to Mommy." Running home to Mommy. After 5 years of running to my bank account every month, they considered my emergency request inappropriate dependence. I stood there for several more minutes waiting for Barbara to reconsider or invite me to stay even one night on the couch. Instead, she moved toward the front door, clearly indicating that my visit should conclude. "You'll figure something out," she said with forced optimism. "You're a smart girl." A smart girl who'd apparently been too stupid to recognize that unconditional financial support didn't guarantee basic human compassion in return. I walked back to my car without another word, leaving behind the family I'd sacrificed everything to support, and the mother who'd just taught me that love apparently came with very specific conditions. I sat in the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts on Boston Road, staring at my phone screen, while the afternoon sun streamed through my windshield. The familiar logo of my banking app felt like a gateway to painful truth as I opened it to confront the mathematical reality of my relationship with my family. Transaction by transaction, I scrolled through 5 years of electronic transfers that told the story of my financial sacrifice in brutal detail. Each entry represented a choice I'd made to prioritize their needs over my own comfort, security, and future. March 15, 2019, initial transfer of $2,000 to Barbara Chen for mortgage assistance. I remembered that day clearly because it coincided with my promotion to senior marketing coordinator. My salary increase had felt like destiny providing exactly what my family needed during their crisis. April through December of that first year, $24,000 in steady monthly payments plus additional transfers for Tyler's textbooks, Emma's medical co-pays, and Robert's job search expenses. By Christmas, I'd sent $28,000 while convincing myself it was temporary assistance during a difficult period. Year 2 had brought escalating requests as their comfort with my support grew. Monthly payments increased to $2,500 to cover rising household costs. Emergency transfers became routine car repairs, medical bills, home maintenance, and various family crises that always seemed to require immediate financial solutions. Tyler's trade school expenses expanded beyond tuition to include specialized tools, safety equipment, and certification fees that weren't covered by his initial enrollment. Emma's medical needs grew from essential surgery to optional cosmetic procedures that she claimed would improve her job prospects and self-confidence. By year 3, my monthly contribution had reached $3,000, consuming nearly 60% of my take-home income. I'd moved to a studio apartment to reduce my housing costs, telling myself it was a temporary sacrifice that would end when their situation stabilized. Year 4 brought Frank into the picture, though I hadn't known about him at the time. The family's requests for increased support coincided with his arrival, but Barbara had explained the higher expenses as necessary, home maintenance and rising costs of living. I'd never questioned why their needs had suddenly expanded by another $500 monthly. Now calculating the total in the parking lot of a donut shop while homeless and exhausted, the numbers formed a devastating equation. Over 62 months, I'd transferred approximately $3,400 monthly on average, accounting for gradual increases and periodic emergency payments. $214,000. The figure stared back at me from my phone screen like an accusation. $214,000 that could have purchased a house, funded my retirement account, or provided genuine financial security for my own future. Instead, it had purchased me exactly nothing. Not gratitude, not consideration during my own crisis, not even basic human decency when I'd needed temporary shelter. I opened a note-taking app and began documenting the specifics, driven by some compulsion to understand exactly how thoroughly I'd been exploited. Mortgage payments that had prevented foreclosure, $68,000. Tyler's education and equipment, $31,000. Emma's medical procedures and cosmetic enhancements, $22,000. Robert's job search support and vehicle maintenance, $18,000. Home improvements and lifestyle upgrades, $43,000. Frank's mysterious expenses that had never been clearly explained, $32,000. The itemization made it worse somehow. I could have purchased a decent house with those mortgage payments. I could have funded my own graduate education instead of Tyler's trade certification. I could have invested in my appearance and health instead of Emma's optional procedures. I could have maintained my own vehicle properly instead of enabling Robert's transportation needs. But the most painful realization was the lifestyle disparity my sacrifice had created. While I'd lived on generic groceries, worn the same professional wardrobe for years, and driven an increasingly unreliable car, my family had enjoyed steady improvement in their quality of life. They'd upgraded their cable package to premium channels while I'd canceled my streaming subscriptions. They'd installed central air conditioning while I'd sweltered through summer months with a single window unit. They'd renovated their kitchen while I'd eaten meals prepared on a hot plate in my studio apartment. Every comfort I'd denied myself had somehow transformed into comfort for them. Every sacrifice I'd made to stretch my budget had enabled them to expand theirs. Every dollar I'd saved by living beneath my means had been transferred to support them living above theirs. And now, when catastrophe had stripped away everything I'd worked to build, they couldn't offer me a couch for a single night. My phone buzzed with a text message from Barbara. "Hope you find somewhere nice to stay. Let us know how the insurance works out." Let us know how the insurance works out. As if my homelessness was a minor inconvenience she'd hear about eventually through casual conversation. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing documentation file. Something about the casual cruelty of her tone struck me as important evidence of how completely our relationship had become one-sided. Sitting in that parking lot, surrounded by the familiar sights of my hometown while feeling more alone than ever, I began to understand that I'd been funding my own emotional abuse for 5 years. I'd paid over $200,000 for the privilege of being treated like an ATM rather than a daughter. The arithmetic of betrayal was simple and devastating. I'd given them everything, and they'd given me nothing in return except the expectation that I'd continue giving forever. The Sunrise Motel on Route 9 wasn't exactly the Ritz-Carlton, but at $68 a night, it represented affordable, temporary shelter while I figured out my next steps. The orange shag carpet and wood-paneled walls belonged to an earlier decade, but the room was clean and the Wi-Fi worked, which was all I needed for the moment. I sat on the edge of the polyester bedspread, finally ready to call my college friend Jessica and admit what I'd been hiding for 5 years. Jessica and I had maintained our friendship since graduation from UMass Amherst, but I'd gradually declined most social invitations, claiming work obligations or budget constraints that prevented me from joining group activities. Alicia. "Oh my God, I saw the news about the apartment fire. Are you okay? Where are you staying?" Jessica's voice carried genuine concern that felt foreign after my mother's indifference. "I'm at a motel for now. Listen, Jess, I need to tell you something I should have shared years ago." I explained the financial arrangement with my family, starting with the initial emergency and escalating to the current monthly transfers. Jessica listened without interruption, occasionally making soft sounds of disbelief as the scope of my situation became clear. "Wait, back up," she said when I finished. "You've been sending them $3,000 every month for 5 years, Alicia. That's insane. No wonder you never joined us for anything." I thought I was helping them through a temporary crisis. $3,000 a month isn't helping. That's like adopting 3 additional adults, and they kicked you out when you needed help. Hearing it summarized so bluntly by someone outside the situation made the dysfunction impossible to ignore. Jessica's shocked reaction confirmed what I'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to acknowledge normal families don't operate this way. "Remember Sarah's bachelorette party in Newport? You said you had a work conference that weekend." I couldn't afford the hotel and activities, I admitted. "And Tom's birthday dinner at that steakhouse you claimed you were on a cleanse." $50 for dinner seemed irresponsible when I was already stretched thin. "Jesus, Alicia. We thought you'd become antisocial or didn't enjoy our company anymore." The revelation that my friends had noticed my withdrawal but misunderstood the cause added another layer of shame to my situation. I'd isolated myself socially to fund my family's lifestyle, and nobody had realized the sacrifice I was making. "Show me their social media," Jessica said. "I want to see what they've been doing with your money." I hesitated, but Jessica insisted, so I pulled up Tyler's Instagram account on my phone. The feed told a story of comfortable living that contradicted his supposed financial struggles. Photos from last month showed him at a Red Sox game with premium seats behind home plate. Earlier posts featured his new Harley-Davidson motorcycle, a fishing trip to Cape Cod, and dinner dates at expensive restaurants in downtown Springfield. Emma's Facebook page was even more revealing. Her recent posts included photos from a spa weekend in Vermont, a designer handbag collection that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and professional photographs from a cosmetic procedure she described as medically necessary, but that looks suspiciously like purely aesthetic enhancement. "These pictures are from the past 6 months," Jessica said, scrolling through the evidence of their comfortable lifestyle. "Look at this vacation post from Emma. She's in the Bahamas drinking cocktails that cost $20 each." The Bahamas trip had occurred in January, right around the time Emma had called me crying about needing money for emergency dental work. Apparently, the emergency had been resolved quickly enough for her to vacation in the Caribbean a few weeks later. And look at Tyler's motorcycle posts. He's bragging about the custom modifications he's made. That bike probably cost $15,000. $15,000 represented 5 months of my contributions to their household expenses. Tyler had essentially taken 5 months of my financial sacrifice and converted it into a luxury vehicle, while I drove a 12-year-old Honda with a transmission that slipped in cold weather. "Your family has been living like kings while you've been eating ramen noodles," Jessica said bluntly. "This isn't financial assistance. This is exploitation." But the most painful discovery was Barbara's recent posts about her relationship with Frank. Photos showed them at wine tastings, dinner cruises, and weekend getaways to mountain resorts. The captions included loving references to Frank's generosity and thoughtfulness, painting him as a devoted partner who provided romantic experiences and financial stability. Financial stability that I had unknowingly provided while Frank received credit for the lifestyle my money had made possible. "Who is this guy?" Jessica asked, pointing to a photo of Frank and Barbara at what appeared to be an expensive restaurant. "Her boyfriend, Frank. I met him today for the first time, but apparently he's been living there for almost a year. Living there rent-free while you've been sending $3,000 a month. Alicia, you've been supporting some stranger's comfortable retirement." The social media evidence made my situation undeniably clear. While I'd been sacrificing my social life, postponing my dreams, and living below my means, my family had been documenting their upgraded lifestyle online for everyone to see. They'd used my financial support to fund luxury experiences while portraying themselves as generous, successful people who'd achieved comfortable living through their own efforts. Every vacation photo, every expensive purchase, every restaurant check-in represented money I'd earned through long hours at work and careful budgeting. But they'd received all the enjoyment while I'd experienced all the deprivation. "I feel like such an idiot," I said, staring at photos of Emma's spa treatments, while remembering how I'd been cutting my own hair to save money for their household expenses. "You're not an idiot. You're a generous person who got taken advantage of by people who should have protected you instead of exploiting you." Jessica's anger on my behalf felt validating in a way I hadn't expected. For 5 years, I doubted my own feelings about the unfairness of the situation, telling myself that family sacrifice was normal and that I was being selfish to want anything for myself. But seeing their comfortable lifestyle documented online while I sat in a motel room after being denied emergency shelter made the exploitation impossible to rationalize anymore. I'd been funding their happiness while denying my own, and they'd been perfectly content to let that arrangement continue indefinitely. My phone buzzed at 6:45 the next morning, jolting me from restless sleep on the motel's lumpy mattress. The text message from Barbara appeared on my lock screen like a cruel joke after yesterday's rejection. "Emma needs $1,200 for dental cleaning and whitening. Transfer today." I stared at the message in disbelief. Less than 24 hours after refusing me emergency shelter, my mother was back to making financial demands as if nothing had happened between us. The casual entitlement in her tone suggested she viewed our interaction yesterday as a minor disagreement that shouldn't interfere with my ongoing obligation to fund the family's expenses. $1,200 for dental cleaning and whitening, not emergency root canal surgery or urgent medical treatment, but cosmetic dental procedures that were entirely optional. Emma apparently needed her teeth professionally brightened, while I sat in a roadside motel trying to rebuild my entire life from scratch. I screenshot the message and started a new folder on my phone labeled Documentation. Something about Barbara's tone and timing struck me as important evidence of their manipulation tactics, though I wasn't sure yet what I planned to do with the information. The more I thought about their communication patterns over the years, the more I recognized the sophisticated psychological manipulation they'd employed to maintain my financial compliance. Every request followed the same formula: urgent timing, emotional appeals and consequences that would impact the entire family if I didn't respond immediately. Tyler needs tuition money by Friday or he'll lose his spot in the welding program. Emma's surgery can't wait any longer, or her deviated septum will cause permanent breathing problems. Dad's truck repair has to be done this week, or he won't be able to look for work. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow, and the bank will start foreclosure proceedings if we're late again. Each crisis had felt legitimate in isolation, each deadline genuinely urgent, each consequence too serious to risk by delaying my response. But viewed collectively, their requests revealed a pattern of manufactured urgency designed to prevent me from questioning the necessity or appropriateness of their demands. They'd learned exactly which emotional buttons to press to ensure my compliance. Appeals to family loyalty, fears about Tyler's educational future, concerns about Emma's health anxiety about the family home being lost forever. Every request had been framed as a temporary emergency that would resolve quickly, but the emergencies had continued for 5 consecutive years. I opened my laptop and began researching financial abuse tactics, curious whether my situation matched established patterns of exploitation. What I found was deeply disturbing and remarkably familiar. Financial abuse often involved family members who gradually increased demands while isolating the victim from outside perspectives. Check. Abusers typically created artificial urgency around requests to prevent careful consideration of the appropriateness. Check. They often portrayed themselves as victims of circumstances while painting the financial provider as selfish for questioning the arrangement. Check. Most importantly, financial abusers rarely expressed genuine gratitude for the support they received, instead treating it as an entitlement or obligation that the provider owed them due to family relationships or past benefits. Double check. As I researched, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. The caller ID showed a Springfield area code, so I answered cautiously. Alicia, this is Diane Morrison, your mother's neighbor. I hope you don't mind me calling. I vaguely remembered Mrs. Morrison from childhood visits, though we'd never spoken directly as adults. I wanted to reach out because I've been concerned about some things I've overheard, and after seeing your mother's social media posts, I felt like someone should tell you the truth about how she's been representing your relationship. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Well, Barbara has been telling neighbors that you're finally contributing your fair share to the household after years of taking advantage of your parents' generosity. She's been saying that you lived at home through college without paying rent, and that supporting the family now is just you paying back what you owe them for raising you. The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. Barbara hadn't just been exploiting me financially. She'd been managing my reputation in the community to ensure that nobody would question the appropriateness of our arrangement. She's also been bragging about Frank's business investments and how he's been helping improve the property value of the house. But everyone knows Frank hasn't worked steadily in years. We've all been wondering where the money was coming from for all their home improvements and lifestyle upgrades. Mrs. Morrison's revelations confirmed my worst suspicions about how my financial support had been perceived and misrepresented. Instead of recognizing my sacrifice, Barbara had portrayed me as a deadbeat daughter, finally fulfilling my obligations to the family that had invested in raising me. I thought you should know because it didn't seem right to me. I raised 4 children and none of them owe me anything for the privilege of being born. After hanging up with Mrs. Morrison, I felt a strange combination of validation and fury. Validation because an outside observer had recognized the inappropriateness of my situation. Fury because Barbara's manipulation had extended far beyond our private family dynamic to include community reputation management designed to maintain her victim narrative. She'd spent 5 years casting herself as the struggling single mother whose ungrateful daughter had finally stepped up to help, while simultaneously living off my earnings and enjoying Frank's companionship. The public story bore no resemblance to the private reality of my financial sacrifice and social isolation. But most importantly, Mrs. Morrison's call had revealed that their current comfortable lifestyle was entirely dependent on my continued financial support. Frank's business investments were apparently non-existent, which meant my monthly transfers were the primary funding source for their home improvements, luxury purchases, and recreational activities, which gave me for the first time in 5 years genuine leverage in our relationship. The question was what to do with it. Instead of transferring the $1,200 for Emma's dental vanity project, I decided to call Barbara directly and demand some honest answers about their family finances. If I was going to continue supporting them, I needed to understand exactly where my money was going and why their expenses kept escalating despite my increasingly generous contributions. Barbara answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cheerful with the assumption that I was calling to confirm the money transfer. "Oh, good, I was hoping you'd call. Emma has an appointment this afternoon, so if you could send the payment by noon, that would be perfect." "Actually, Mom, I'm not calling about the transfer. I want to talk about something else first." The shift in her tone was immediate and unmistakable. "What do you mean?" "I want to understand your household budget. I've been supporting this family for 5 years, and I think I deserve to know how my money is being spent." "Alicia, we've been through this. You know where the money goes. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, medical expenses. But those expenses keep increasing despite my larger and larger contributions. Something doesn't add up." Silence stretched across the phone line for nearly 15 seconds. When Barbara spoke again, her voice carried a defensive edge that immediately raised my suspicions. "Things get more expensive. That's how inflation works." "Mom, my contributions have increased by 50% over 5 years. That's not normal inflation." "Well, we've had additional expenses." "What additional expenses?" Another pause longer this time. I could practically hear her calculating how much truth to reveal without damaging her financial arrangement with me. "Frank has been helping with household management and property improvements. Those cost money. Frank's been living there. He's been staying here sometimes to help with projects around the house." "Sometimes." Mrs. Morrison had suggested Frank had been there for almost a year, but Barbara was still trying to minimize his presence and impact on their expenses. "How long has Frank been staying there?" "It's not really your business who I spend time with, Alicia." "It becomes my business when I'm paying the bills for whoever's living in that house." The defensiveness in Barbara's voice escalated quickly. "Frank contributes to the household. He's not some freeloader." "How does he contribute?" "He helps with improvements and investments that increase the property value." Investments. That was a new word in our conversations about their finances. For 5 years, every request had been framed as essential survival expenses, but now Barbara was admitting to investments funded by my contributions. "What kind of investments?" "Business opportunities that will generate income eventually." "What business opportunities?" "Look, Alicia, Frank has experience in landscaping and property development. He's been advising us about ways to increase our long-term financial stability." Property development. Frank, the unemployed boyfriend, had somehow transformed into a financial advisor, guiding my family's investment strategy using my monthly transfers as seed capital. Mom, I need you to be completely honest with me. How much of my monthly payments have been going to Frank's business ventures? That's not how it works. The money goes into our general household account. And then some of it goes to Frank for his business projects. Frank is part of our household now. His success benefits everyone. Part of our household. Barbara had essentially admitted that I'd been unknowingly supporting Frank's living expenses and business schemes for months, while she'd presented all requests as essential family survival needs. How long has Frank been part of your household? About 10 months. 10 months. I quickly calculated the timeline and realized that my monthly contribution increases had coincided almost exactly with Frank's arrival. What Barbara had described as rising household costs had actually been Frank's integration into their financial structure. So when you asked me to increase my monthly payments to cover higher expenses, you were actually asking me to support Frank. I was asking you to help support our family's financial stability. Frank isn't family. He is to me. The admission hung in the air between us like a challenge. Barbara had been prioritizing her boyfriend's comfort and business ambitions over her daughter's financial well-being, using my earnings to fund a man I'd never met while I'd been living like a graduate student to stretch my budget around their needs. What happened to his landscaping business? There were some setbacks with previous ventures, but he's learned from those experiences. Setbacks. That was an interesting euphemism for whatever had ended Frank's previous employment and left him available to become a full-time dependent in my mother's household. Mom, I've been homeless for less than 24 hours, and instead of offering me help, you're asking for more money to pay for Frank's dental cosmetics and business investments. Emma's dental work isn't cosmetic, it's preventative care. $1,200 for cleaning and whitening was definitely cosmetic, but Barbara's automatic deflection revealed how thoroughly she'd learned to rationalize every expense as essential rather than optional. I think we need to have a serious conversation about boundaries and realistic expectations for this financial arrangement. What do you mean? I can't continue sending $3,000 a month indefinitely, especially when I don't know how the money is being spent. The silence that followed felt different from her previous pauses. This time I could sense genuine alarm behind her hesitation. Alicia, this family has been counting on your support. You can't just abandon us because you're having temporary problems. Abandon them. After 5 years of sacrificing my own security to ensure theirs questioning the sustainability of unlimited financial support was characterized as abandonment. But her choice of words revealed something important. They had been counting on my support, not appreciating it, not viewing it as generous assistance during a difficult period, but counting on it as a permanent income source that they had every right to expect would continue indefinitely. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm asking for reasonable transparency about how my contributions are being used. Fine, I'll send you a budget breakdown next week. Next week, another delay tactic to avoid immediate accountability while maintaining access to my bank account. I'd prefer to review the information before sending any more payments. Alicia, Emma's appointment is this afternoon. And there it was, the return to artificial urgency, designed to prevent me from thinking too carefully about the appropriateness of their request. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't automatically capitulate to their timeline. Emma's appointment can wait until we have this conversation. I hung up before Barbara could respond, leaving her to contemplate the possibility that her golden goose might finally be developing some financial boundaries. The Springfield Public Library offered free internet access and a quiet place to conduct research that would probably disturb other motel guests if I did it from my room. I settled into a corner computer terminal with my laptop and spent the morning investigating Frank's background and business history. What I discovered was far worse than I'd imagined. Frank Morrison's landscaping company, Green Valley Property Services, had been dissolved 3 years ago, following a series of legal challenges that painted a picture of systematic financial irresponsibility. Public court records showed unpaid contractor bills totaling $67,000 tax liens from the state of Massachusetts for $31,000 in unpaid employment taxes and civil judgments from former clients claiming work had been abandoned mid-project after full payment had been received. The Better Business Bureau listing for Green Valley Property Services showed an F rating based on 12 unresolved complaints about incomplete work and poor communication. Customer reviews describe Frank as charming and persuasive during initial sales meetings, but unreliable when it came to following through on contracted services. But the most disturbing discovery was a bankruptcy filing from 2 years ago that listed Frank's total debts at over $140,000. The filing included credit card balances, unpaid business loans, federal tax obligations, and a judgment from his former business partner alleging that Frank had misappropriated company funds for personal use. Frank Morrison wasn't a successful landscaping entrepreneur facing temporary setbacks. He was a habitual business failure with a documented history of financial mismanagement and questionable ethics. And my mother had been using my monthly contributions to subsidize his living expenses and fund his latest business schemes for nearly a year. I printed the public records and continued digging into property records for the family house. What I found there was equally shocking. Barbara had refinanced the mortgage 6 months ago, taking advantage of the payment history I'd provided to qualify for a lower interest rate and extracting $43,000 in cash through the refinancing process. $43,000 that should have been equity in the house I'd helped save from foreclosure. Instead, it had been converted to cash that could be spent on Frank's investment opportunities or lifestyle upgrades without my knowledge or consent. The refinancing documents listed Barbara's income as sufficient to support the new mortgage payments, which was mathematically impossible unless my monthly contributions were being counted as her regular income. The bank had essentially approved her loan application based on money I was providing, but I'd never been informed about the refinancing or consulted about the cash extraction. I'd been used as a phantom co-signer for a mortgage refinancing that benefited Frank and Barbara while increasing their monthly obligations and extending the timeline for paying off the house. But the most infuriating discovery was in the property improvement permits Barbara had filed with the city over the past year. The permits listed Frank Morrison as the contractor for landscaping kitchen renovations and bathroom upgrades, totaling over $28,000 in declared value. Frank had been paying himself to make improvements to a house I'd been supporting, using my contributions as both the funding source and his personal income. Every dollar I'd sent to help with their mortgage and household expenses had been available for Frank to redirect into home improvement projects that increased the property's value while lining his own pockets. The financial scheme was elegant in its deception and devastating in its impact on my personal finances. I'd been unknowingly funding Frank's income, housing, and business ventures while he'd received credit for generous contributions to the household and property improvements. Meanwhile, I'd been living in a studio apartment with a hot plate and a 15-year-old car while convinced that I was helping my family survive financial hardship. I called Jessica from the library parking lot and explained what I'd discovered. Her response was immediate and uncompromising. "Alicia, this isn't family financial assistance. This is organized fraud. They've been running a con game on you for almost a year." I don't think my mom understood the full scope of what Frank was doing. "Your mother refinanced the house using your income and didn't tell you. She knows exactly what's happening." Jessica's blunt assessment forced me to confront the possibility that Barbara hadn't been manipulated by Frank's schemes, but had been an active participant in exploiting my financial generosity. The refinancing required careful planning and documentation that would have made Barbara fully aware of how my contributions were being used to qualify for the loan. "You need to cut them off immediately," Jessica continued. And you should probably consult a lawyer about whether you have any recourse for recovering the money they extracted through that refinancing. A lawyer. The idea of legal action against my own family felt surreal, but the documentation I'd gathered suggested that my relationship with them had crossed the line from family support into financial exploitation that might warrant legal intervention. I can't afford a lawyer right now. I'm living in a motel and trying to rebuild everything after the fire. Then start with documentation. Print everything you can find and create a comprehensive record of where your money went. If you decide to take action later, you'll need evidence. I spent the rest of the afternoon printing documents and creating a timeline that showed how Frank's arrival had coincided with increased requests for money, how the refinancing had converted my support into extractable equity, and how Frank had systematically positioned himself to benefit financially from my relationship with my family. The paper trail revealed a level of financial manipulation that went far beyond taking advantage of a generous daughter's willingness to help during hard times. This was a systematic extraction of my income to fund someone else's lifestyle and failed business ventures. But the most painful realization was that Barbara had knowingly participated in the deception. The refinancing documents, permit applications, and budget increases all required her active involvement and approval. She hadn't been an innocent victim of Frank's manipulation. She'd been his partner in exploiting my financial support, which meant that for nearly a year I'd been sending money to people who viewed me as a resource to be managed rather than a daughter to be appreciated. The question now was what to do with that knowledge and whether I had the courage to act on it. My phone rang at 8:30 that evening while I was eating takeout Chinese food in my motel room and reviewing the financial documents I'd printed. Tyler's name appeared on the caller ID, which was unusual since he typically communicated through Barbara rather than calling me directly. "Hey, Alicia, Mom told me about the apartment fire. That really sucks." His tone carried what sounded like genuine sympathy, and for a moment I hoped that at least one family member might offer practical support or emotional understanding about my situation. "Thanks, Tyler. It's been a difficult couple of days." "I bet. Listen, I hate to bring this up when you're dealing with all that, but I have a situation that can't really wait." A situation that can't wait. The familiar phrase triggered immediate suspicion about Tyler's motivations for calling, but I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. "What's going on?" "So you know I'm finishing my welding certification next month, right? Well, there's this graduation ceremony where they present the certificates and introduce us to potential employers from around the region." "That sounds great." "It is, but here's the thing. There's a fee for participating in the ceremony, and if I don't pay it by Friday, I lose my slot and miss the networking opportunities. It could really impact my job prospects." Of course there was a fee, and of course it was due by Friday with dire consequences if not paid immediately. The manipulation playbook was apparently shared among all family members. "How much is the fee?" "It's $1,800. $1,800 for a graduation ceremony fee seemed excessive, but trade schools sometimes had unusual requirements that didn't apply to traditional college programs. "That seems like a lot for a ceremony fee." "Well, it includes the certificate presentation, a networking dinner with employers, and access to exclusive job placement services that aren't available to graduates who don't participate. Did you know about this fee when you enrolled?" A pause that lasted just long enough to suggest Tyler hadn't expected that question. "It was mentioned in some of the paperwork, but I thought I'd be able to cover it with savings by the time it came up." "What happened to your savings?" "Well, you know living expenses have been higher than expected, and I had some unexpected costs with my bike maintenance." Bike maintenance. Tyler's expensive motorcycle required maintenance that had apparently consumed the money he should have been saving for graduation ceremony fees. "Tyler, I've been supporting the household for 5 years. Where has that money been going if not toward covering your educational expenses?" "I don't know, Alicia. I don't handle the household budget. I just know that this ceremony fee is something I need to cover myself, and I'm short right now." The deflection was smooth but unconvincing. Tyler claimed ignorance about household finances while simultaneously calling me for money because family resources weren't available to cover his personal expenses. "Have you talked to Mom about using household funds for this?" She said the household budget is tight right now and suggested I ask you directly since it's related to my education. Barbara had apparently trained Tyler to bypass family financial discussions and appeal directly to me for anything above basic survival expenses. The graduation ceremony fee was being framed as my personal responsibility rather than a family educational investment. "Tyler, I'm homeless right now. My insurance only covers a fraction of what I lost in the fire. This might not be the best time to ask me for $1,800. I get that you're stressed, but this deadline isn't flexible. If I miss this ceremony, it could affect my whole career trajectory." The guilt trip was expertly applied. Tyler's entire professional future hung in the balance, and my temporary housing problems were being minimized as manageable stress rather than a genuine crisis requiring family support. Before I could respond, I heard another voice in the background, and Tyler's tone changed slightly. "Actually, Emma wants to talk to you about something too. Alicia." Emma's voice came through the phone with the slightly breathless quality she used when excited about something. "I'm so sorry about your apartment. That must be really scary." It was terrifying. I can't even imagine. But listen, since I have you on the phone, I wanted to ask about something time-sensitive. Time-sensitive. Every conversation with my family involved time-sensitive requests that couldn't wait for more convenient moments or family discussions. "What is it, Emma?" "I have this amazing job interview next week for a marketing position at a really prestigious firm downtown. It could be exactly the career break I've been waiting for." "That's exciting." "It is, but here's the challenge. I need a complete professional wardrobe because the interview process involves meeting with multiple executives over 2 days, and I can't wear the same outfit twice." "How much would that cost?" "I found everything I need at Nordstrom, and with the shoes and accessories it comes to about $1,400, but it's really an investment in my future earning potential." $1,400 for interview clothes seemed excessive, especially for someone who'd been unemployed or underemployed for most of the time I'd been supporting the family. "Emma, that's a lot of money for interview outfits." "I know it seems expensive, but this is a senior-level position that could pay $60,000 a year. The investment would pay for itself within the first month if I get the job." The logic was superficially reasonable, but something about Emma's tone suggested she was reading from a script rather than speaking spontaneously about her career concerns. "When is the interview?" "Next Thursday and Friday." "And you need the clothes by when?" "Well, I'd like to get them this weekend so I have time to get them tailored properly." "This weekend." Both Tyler and Emma had called with urgent financial requests that required immediate payment despite my current crisis and explicitly stated inability to help. "Let me understand this correctly," I said slowly. "I told you both that I'm homeless and dealing with insurance problems, and you're asking me to send you over $3,000 for graduation fees and interview clothes." "It's not like we're asking for vacation money," Tyler said defensively. "These are investments in our futures. And your futures are more important than my current emergency situation." "That's not what we're saying," Emma replied. "But your situation is temporary and these opportunities have specific deadlines." Temporary. My homelessness was temporary and therefore less important than their wardrobe and ceremony needs. "Have either of you offered to help me with anything? A place to stay, help moving my belongings, assistance, dealing with insurance?" Silence stretched across the phone line for several seconds. "We would if we could," Tyler finally said, "but we don't really have resources to help with that kind of thing." "You don't have resources to help, but you expect me to have resources to fund your expenses." "That's different," Emma said. "You have a good job and savings." "I had savings. Now I have nothing except what insurance will cover, and that's not going to be enough." "Look, Alicia," Tyler said, his tone becoming more demanding. "We understand you're stressed, but we've all got our own challenges. These aren't luxury requests. These are necessities for our career advancement. And my housing isn't a necessity. You'll figure out the housing thing, Emma said dismissively. You always do. But if Tyler misses this ceremony or I blow this interview because I don't have proper clothes, those opportunities won't come around again. The casual dismissal of my crisis, while demanding immediate financial support for their optional expenses, revealed how thoroughly my family had learned to prioritize their wants over my needs. I'm not sending any money right now, I said firmly. Are you serious? Tyler's voice rose with anger. You're going to sabotage our futures because you're having temporary problems. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm dealing with an actual emergency. This is really selfish, Alicia, Emma added. We're family. We're supposed to support each other. After 5 years of one-way financial support and being denied emergency shelter, Emma was lecturing me about mutual family support. I hung up without another word, leaving them to contemplate the possibility that their personal ATM might finally be developing some boundaries. The insurance adjuster arrived at my destroyed apartment building Tuesday morning with a clipboard and an expression that suggested I wasn't going to like what he had to tell me. Robert Chen from Northeastern Mutual Insurance spent 45 minutes documenting the damage while I stood in the hallway breathing through a surgical mask to filter the lingering smoke particles. Ms. Thompson, I've completed my preliminary assessment, and I need to explain some limitations in your coverage that will affect your settlement. My heart sank as he opened his folder and pulled out a document with highlighted sections that looked ominous. Your renter's policy includes a standard electrical fire exclusion clause for buildings constructed before 1970. This building dates to 1958, which means the electrical fire coverage is significantly reduced. What does that mean in practical terms? Instead of the $25,000 in personal property coverage, you thought you had the applicable coverage for this type of loss is $12,000. $12,000. I'd been counting on full coverage to help me rebuild my life, purchase new furniture, replace my clothes, and cover temporary housing costs while I searched for a new apartment. $12,000 would barely cover basic necessities, leaving me financially devastated for months. Is there any way to appeal that determination? The exclusion is clearly stated in your policy documents. I'm sorry, but electrical fires in older buildings carry higher risk, which is why the coverage is limited. Robert's professional sympathy felt hollow as he explained that I'd been paying premiums for years without understanding that my actual coverage was less than half what I'd believed I had. The good news is that your additional living expense coverage will help with temporary housing costs up to $4,000 over 6 months. $4,000 over 6 months worked out to about $650 monthly for housing assistance, which might cover a basic motel room but wouldn't help with security deposits, utility connections, or furniture replacement for a permanent residence. After Robert left, I sat in my car calculating the devastating math of rebuilding my life on $12,000. Basic furniture for a one-bedroom apartment would cost at least $8,000. A security deposit and first month's rent would consume another $3,000. That left me with $1,000 for clothes, kitchen supplies, bedding, and all the small necessities that make an apartment livable. Meanwhile, my family was demanding $3,000 for Tyler's graduation ceremony and Emma's interview wardrobe. I called Barbara to explain the insurance setback, hoping that news of my genuine financial crisis might generate some sympathy or reconsideration of their recent requests. Mom, I got the insurance assessment today and it's not good news. Oh no, what happened? The coverage is only $12,000 instead of $25,000 because of an exclusion clause for electrical fires in old buildings. Silence on the other end for several seconds. Well, that's disappointing, but at least you'll get something. Mom, $12,000 won't cover rebuilding my life. I'll need months to recover financially. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're resourceful. The casual dismissal of my crisis felt like a physical blow. I just explained that I was facing potential financial ruin, and Barbara's response was confidence that I'd somehow handle it independently. This means I can't help with Tyler's ceremony fee or Emma's interview clothes right now. Alicia, they're counting on that money. Tyler's deadline is Friday and Emma's interview is next week. I understand, but I literally don't have the money. I need every penny for basic survival. You could take out a loan or use credit cards temporarily. A loan? Barbara was suggesting I go into debt to continue funding my family's optional expenses while I struggled to afford basic necessities after losing everything in a fire. Mom, I'm not taking out loans to pay for graduation ceremonies and designer interview outfits while I'm homeless. You're being dramatic. You're staying in a motel, not living on the street. Dramatic. My genuine financial crisis was being minimized as dramatic overreaction, while their voluntary expenses were treated as urgent necessities. I'm hanging up now. Alicia, wait. Maybe we could work out some kind of payment plan. A payment plan for Tyler's ceremony fee. Barbara was treating my family relationships like a commercial transaction with flexible payment terms, rather than recognizing that I needed support during an actual emergency. There's no payment plan. I can't afford to help anyone right now. This is really disappointing. The children are going to be very upset. The children, Tyler and Emma, aged 25 and 23 respectively, were being characterized as children whose disappointment was my responsibility to manage through continued financial sacrifice. They'll have to find another solution. What other solution? You're the only one with money. I was the only one with money because I'd been sending them my money for 5 years while living below my means. But Barbara's phrasing revealed how thoroughly she'd come to view my income as a family resource rather than my personal earnings. Maybe Frank could help with Tyler's ceremony fee. Frank doesn't have that kind of money available right now. Of course, Frank didn't have money available. Frank's business ventures had been funded by my contributions, and without my continued payments, his investment capital had apparently evaporated. Then maybe you could use some of the money from the refinancing. The line went quiet for nearly 15 seconds. How do you know about the refinancing? I've been doing some research about our family's financial situation. That's really none of your business, Alicia. It becomes my business when my income was used to qualify for the loan. The refinancing was handled properly through appropriate channels. Appropriate channels that hadn't included informing or consulting the daughter whose income had made the refinancing possible. Where did the cash from the refinancing go? That money was invested in property improvements that benefit the whole family. Property improvements performed by Frank and paid for with money I'd contributed to household expenses, creating a circular financial arrangement where my support had been converted into Frank's income, while Barbara extracted equity from the house I'd helped save. Mom, I've lost everything in a fire. My insurance won't cover rebuilding my life, and instead of offering help, you're asking me to take out loans to continue funding everyone else's expenses. Family members support each other during difficult times. Which family members have supported me during this difficult time? Silence. I need to go. Alicia, think carefully about what you're doing. This family has been counting on your help. Counting on my help. Not appreciating it, not grateful for it, but counting on it as a permanent entitlement that I couldn't withdraw without being accused of abandoning my responsibilities. Maybe it's time for this family to stop counting on me and start supporting themselves. I hung up and turned off my phone, exhausted by the emotional manipulation and financial pressure from people who should have been offering comfort and assistance during the worst crisis of my adult life. Instead, they were treating my catastrophic loss as a minor inconvenience that shouldn't interfere with their continued access to my bank account. Wednesday evening in my motel room, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to test my family's true priorities by temporarily removing myself from their financial equation and observing their response. If they genuinely cared about my well-being, they would express concern and offer support during my crisis. If they only valued my bank account, their response would focus exclusively on the impact to their financial situation. I composed a group text message to Barbara, Tyler, and Emma, choosing my words carefully to create a realistic scenario that would reveal their authentic feelings about our relationship. I have some difficult news to share. My company announced layoffs today, and my position has been eliminated effective Friday. I'll receive 2 weeks severance pay, but after that, I won't have income until I find a new job. Combined with my insurance shortfall, I won't be able to send any money for the next 3 to 6 months while I rebuild my finances and career. I'm sorry this timing is terrible with Tyler's ceremony and Emma's interview, but I have no choice. I hope you understand. I sent the message and set my phone aside, genuinely nervous about their response. Part of me hoped they would surprise me with compassion and offers of help. Part of me expected exactly what I received. My phone started buzzing within 90 seconds. Barbara called first, her voice sharp with panic rather than sympathy. "Alicia, are you sure about this layoff? Did you check with HR about severance extensions or unemployment benefits?" "I'm sure, Mom. The decision is final." "But what are we supposed to do about Tyler's ceremony fee? It's due Friday." Not, "How are you handling this crisis?" or "Do you need help with anything?" but immediate focus on how my unemployment would affect their financial plans. "I don't know what you'll do about Tyler's fee. I can't help. This is a disaster. Tyler's been counting on that money. I'm sure this is disappointing, but I've been counting on having a home and a job, so we're all dealing with unexpected changes." "It's not the same thing. Your job situation is temporary, but if Tyler misses this ceremony, he loses the opportunity forever." Temporary. My layoff was temporary, but Tyler's ceremony was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that took priority over my unemployment crisis. "I have to go, Mom." "Wait, have you looked into personal loans or credit card advances? This is just a short-term cash flow problem." She hung up when I didn't respond, leaving me to wait for the next wave of contact. Tyler texted 15 minutes later. "Are you serious about this layoff? I can't believe you'd let me down like this when you know how important this ceremony is." Let him down. My involuntary unemployment was being framed as a personal betrayal of Tyler's educational goals. Emma called at 9:47, crying before I even answered the phone. "Alicia, please tell me you're going to figure something out. I can't go to this interview without proper clothes. This could change my entire life." "Emma, I just lost my job. I'm more concerned about keeping a roof over my head than your interview wardrobe." "But you always figure things out. You're smart with money. There has to be some way to cover just $1,400. "There isn't." "What if I promise to pay you back when I get the job?" "You've never paid me back for anything before." "That's because you never asked me to." "I never asked because you never offered." Silence, then more crying. "This is ruining everything. I've been planning this interview for weeks." "Emma, normal people buy interview clothes with their own money. Normal people don't lose their jobs at the worst possible time." The blame was clear. My layoff was poorly timed inconvenience rather than a legitimate crisis-deserving family support. The most revealing response came from Frank, who somehow had access to Barbara's phone and felt entitled to contact me directly about my family's financial situation. "Alicia, this is Frank. Barbara told me about your work situation. I understand these things happen, but I wanted to suggest some creative solutions for maintaining your family support during this transition period." Creative solutions. Frank the tax evader was offering financial advice about maintaining support for his comfortable lifestyle despite my unemployment. What kind of solutions? Well, you could consider a home equity loan against your family home since you've been contributing to those mortgage payments. Or there are short-term lending options with reasonable interest rates for people with good credit. Frank was suggesting I mortgage my family's house or take out high-interest loans to continue funding his living expenses while I was unemployed and homeless. "Frank, I don't own any part of the family home and I can't take out loans while unemployed." "There are ways around employment verification if you work with the right lenders." Frank was suggesting fraudulent loan applications to maintain my financial support for their household. I'm not committing fraud to pay for Tyler's graduation ceremony. It's not fraud if the situation is temporary. You'll be employed again soon. The casual suggestion of illegal financial activity to preserve my family's comfortable lifestyle revealed Frank's true character and his influence on Barbara's financial decisions. But the most important revelation was that in over 2 hours of phone calls, text messages, and voicemails, not one family member had expressed concern about my well-being, offered practical assistance, or acknowledged that I might need support during this crisis. Every contact focused exclusively on how my unemployment would affect their financial plans and what I could do to minimize the impact on their comfort and goals. Tyler never asked how I was handling the stress of losing my job. Emma never offered help with my housing situation. Barbara never expressed sympathy for my compounded difficulties. Frank never suggested that maybe his business ventures could wait until my situation stabilized. Their response had revealed the truth about our relationship. I was valued as a financial resource, not as a person deserving care and support during difficult times. Which meant my decision about how to proceed had just become much easier. I let my family stew in uncertainty about my fabricated layoff for 24 hours before their collective panic reached a fever pitch that revealed the true depths of their entitlement and selfishness. The messages that flooded my phone Thursday evening were unlike anything I'd experienced in 5 years of supporting them, and they stripped away any remaining illusions about their feelings toward me as a person rather than a funding source. Barbara's voicemail at 6:15 was the first indication that their desperation had transformed into ugly aggression. Alicia, I've been thinking about this supposed layoff and something doesn't add up. I called your company's main number and asked about recent personnel changes, and they wouldn't confirm anything. I think you're lying about losing your job to get out of your family responsibilities. If that's true, this is the most selfish thing you've ever done. Call me back immediately. She'd called my workplace to verify my employment status. Barbara had become so panicked about losing access to my income that she'd violated basic boundaries by contacting my employer without permission to investigate whether my crisis was legitimate. Tyler's text message at 7:32 escalated the accusations further. Mom thinks you're lying about the layoff to avoid paying for my ceremony. If that's true, you're sabotaging my entire career because you don't want to spend money on family. That's really messed up, Alicia. They'd constructed a conspiracy theory where my unemployment was a fabricated excuse to avoid family expenses, rather than a genuine crisis requiring their support and understanding. Emma's voicemail at 8:45 was tearful but vindictive. I can't believe you'd make up a story about losing your job just to get out of helping with my interview clothes. Do you know how important this opportunity is? You're being incredibly selfish and manipulative. This is going to ruin my chances at a real career. But the most revealing message came from Frank at 9:15, speaking with the authority of someone who'd apparently appointed himself family spokesman. Alicia, this is Frank. Barbara's very upset about your sudden employment problems, especially since they're so conveniently timed with family financial needs. I think we need to have an honest conversation about responsibility and commitment. I've been doing some research about your options for maintaining family support, even if you are experiencing temporary income disruption. There are definitely solutions available if you're willing to prioritize family over personal convenience. Frank was positioning himself as the reasonable adult addressing my selfish refusal to prioritize family needs over personal convenience, treating my homelessness and unemployment as minor inconveniences that shouldn't interfere with his comfortable lifestyle. I also think you should know that your family's financial stability depends on the support you've been providing. If you suddenly withdraw that support without adequate notice or alternative arrangements, you could cause serious hardship for people who've been counting on your contributions. Frank was threatening me with guilt about causing hardship to people who'd been counting on my money while offering no concern about the hardship I was experiencing. The most manipulative message arrived at 10:03 from Tyler, clearly coordinated with the others to maximize emotional pressure. Alicia, I need you to understand what you're doing to our family. Mom is crying every night because she doesn't know how she's going to cover the mortgage without your help. Dad is talking about taking manual labor jobs that could hurt his back permanently. Emma is devastated about missing her career opportunity, and I'm going to have to explain to my instructors and potential employers why I can't participate in graduation ceremonies that everyone else can afford. The message was designed to make me feel responsible for every family member's distress, while painting my inability to continue unlimited financial support as the cause of their various problems. If you really lost your job, we understand that's difficult. But family members find ways to help each other during tough times instead of just cutting everyone off. There have to be options you haven't considered if you actually want to maintain your relationships with the people who love you. The conditional phrasing was particularly cruel. They loved me if I maintained financial support, but apparently that love was contingent on my continued payments rather than based on genuine care about my well-being. The final message arrived at 11:27 from Barbara, and its tone was unlike anything she'd ever directed toward me. Alicia, I've spent the day thinking about your attitude and behavior over the past week, and I'm ashamed of the person you've become. When we needed help, you were there, and we appreciated that. But the minute you face some temporary problems, you abandon your family and refuse to make sacrifices for the people who raised you and supported you through college. Barbara was rewriting history to suggest that my family had supported me through college, when in fact I'd worked multiple jobs and taken out student loans to pay for my education, while they contributed nothing to my expenses. You're acting like a spoiled child who thinks the world owes her something instead of recognizing that adult responsibilities include helping family members during their times of need. Tyler's graduation ceremony isn't optional luxury spending. It's an investment in his future that could affect his earning potential for decades. Emma's interview clothes aren't vanity purchases. They're professional necessities that could determine whether she escapes minimum wage employment. Every family expense was reframed as essential investment, while my actual crisis was characterized as temporary inconvenience that shouldn't affect my obligations to them. If you've really decided to prioritize yourself over your family, then I guess we know what kind of person you actually are. But don't expect us to welcome you back when your problems are solved and you want to be part of this family again. The ultimate threat: emotional exile if I didn't resume financial support immediately. We'll remember how you treated us when we needed you most. As I read through the collection of messages, voicemails, and text threads they'd sent, over 48 hours, the pattern was unmistakable. Not once had anyone expressed genuine concern about my well-being. Not once had anyone offered practical assistance or emotional support. Not once had anyone acknowledged that losing my job and my home simultaneously might require family rallying to help me rather than demanding that I continue helping them. Instead, they'd accused me of lying, threatened me with emotional exile, and demanded that I prioritize their optional expenses over my basic survival needs. Their venomous response to my fabricated crisis had revealed their true feelings more clearly than years of polite conversation ever could have. I was done enabling their exploitation. Friday morning, I sat in the motel business center with my laptop and composed the most important email of my adult life. After 5 years of enabling financial abuse through excessive generosity, I was finally ready to establish boundaries and demand accountability from people who'd taken my support for granted, while treating me with casual cruelty during my darkest hour. The email needed to be comprehensive, factual, and unambiguous. I wanted to document the extent of my financial sacrifice, expose the manipulation tactics they'd used to maintain my compliance, and make clear that their behavior during my crisis had permanently altered our relationship. Subject ending: financial support, documentation, and explanation. Dear family, I'm writing to inform you that I will no longer provide financial support to any family member effective immediately. This decision is final and non-negotiable, and I want to explain the reasoning behind it so there can be no confusion about my motivations or expectations going forward. First, I need to correct some misinformation that has been circulating about my contributions to this family's finances over the past 5 years. I've sent detailed records to extended family members so they can understand the actual scope of my support, rather than the misleading narrative that has been shared with them. Between April 2019 and March 2024, I transferred exactly $214,650 to support family expenses. This money covered mortgage payments that prevented foreclosure, educational expenses, medical bills, vehicle repairs, home improvements, and various personal expenses for family members. During the same period, I lived in a studio apartment, drove a 15-year-old car, wore the same professional wardrobe for 3 years, canceled vacation plans, postponed home ownership, and declined social activities to stretch my budget around family financial obligations. I learned this week that approximately 1/3 of my contributions over the past year have been used to support Barbara's boyfriend, Frank Morrison, who has been living in the family home while contributing nothing to household expenses. Mr. Morrison has a documented history of business failures, unpaid taxes, and bankruptcy, yet he has been using my financial support to fund new business ventures while receiving credit for property improvements to a house I helped save from foreclosure. I also discovered that Barbara refinanced the family home 6 months ago and extracted $43,000 in cash equity, using my payment history to qualify for the loan without informing me or seeking my consent. This refinancing increased the family's debt obligations while converting my support into cash that could be spent on projects and investments that primarily benefited Mr. Morrison. When my apartment building caught fire Sunday night and I lost everything I owned, I expected basic family support during this crisis. Instead, I was refused emergency shelter and told this isn't a shelter by the woman whose mortgage I'd been paying for 3 years. I was then asked to continue sending money for optional family expenses while I was homeless and dealing with inadequate insurance coverage. Over the past week, family members have demanded over $3,000 for graduation ceremony fees and interview clothing, while dismissing my genuine financial crisis as temporary problems that shouldn't interfere with their access to my bank account. When I explained that I couldn't afford to help while rebuilding my life after the fire, I was accused of being selfish and abandoning my family responsibilities. The response to my fabricated layoff story revealed the true nature of our relationships. Not one family member expressed concern about my well-being or offered assistance during what they believed was a legitimate employment crisis. Instead, every contact focused on how my unemployment would affect their financial plans and what I could do to maintain their access to my income through loans or credit arrangements. I was accused of lying about losing my job to avoid family expenses. Barbara called my workplace to verify my employment status without my permission. Tyler claimed I was sabotaging his career by being unable to pay for his ceremony. Emma called me selfish and manipulative for not funding her interview wardrobe. Frank suggested fraudulent loan applications to maintain family support during my supposed unemployment. This response pattern revealed that I am valued by this family as a financial resource rather than as a person deserving care support and basic human decency during genuine crises. I am copying extended family members on this email because Barbara has been telling people that I was previously taking advantage of family generosity and that my financial support represents me finally contributing my fair share after years of freeloading. This narrative is completely false. I have been entirely financially independent since age 22 and have been supporting other family members consistently since age 27. Going forward, I will have no further involvement in any family member's financial decisions, emergencies, or lifestyle choices. I will not respond to requests for money loans, co-signing arrangements, or financial advice. I will not provide housing, transportation, or other material support during family crises. I am also ending my relationship with Barbara and Frank entirely. I will not visit the family home, participate in family gatherings where Frank is present, or maintain any contact with Barbara until she ends her relationship with the man who has been exploiting my financial support while contributing nothing to family stability. Tyler and Emma may contact me for relationship-building purposes only, but any mention of money, financial assistance, or material support will result in immediate termination of our conversations. I am willing to rebuild authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care, but I will not continue enabling financial dependence that has prevented you from developing adult independence and self-sufficiency. Aunt Linda, Uncle Marcus, and extended family. I apologize for any confusion about family finances that may have been caused by misleading information. I hope this clarification helps you understand the actual dynamics that have been operating in our family. I appreciate your support during this difficult time and look forward to building genuine relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. This decision is final. I will not debate, negotiate, or reconsider these boundaries under any circumstances. The pattern of financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and casual cruelty during my crisis has demonstrated that continuing to support this family would be enabling abuse that prevents everyone from developing healthy independence and self-respect. I wish everyone success in building sustainable finances and genuine relationships based on reciprocal care rather than one-sided obligation. Alicia. I attach spreadsheets documenting every transfer screenshots of their demands during my crisis public records about Frank's financial history and evidence of the mortgage refinancing that had used my income without my knowledge. Before sending the email, I copied Aunt Linda, Uncle Marcus, and several cousins who'd been receiving Barbara's misleading information about my family role. I wanted them to understand the truth about our financial dynamics and Frank's parasitic influence on family relationships. The send button felt like stepping through a doorway into a completely different life. For 5 years, I'd been trapped in a cycle of financial obligation and emotional manipulation that had prevented me from building authentic relationships or genuine security. Now, I was finally free to discover what life looked like when I prioritized my own well-being and reserved my generosity for people who appreciated it, rather than demanding it as an entitlement. I woke at 7:15 Saturday morning to the distinctive buzz pattern of my phone, receiving multiple calls in rapid succession, 25 missed calls, 52 text messages, 14 voicemails, and 3 emails marked urgent. The financial support that had quietly sustained my family's comfortable lifestyle for 5 years had vanished overnight, and the resulting chaos was immediate and comprehensive. Barbara's first voicemail, recorded at 6:42 a.m., was barely coherent through her panic and rage. "Alicia, what have you done? The mortgage payment bounced this morning. Tyler's ceremony fee was declined. Emma can't get her interview clothes. Frank's tax payment failed. Everyone is calling me asking questions about that email. Call me immediately." Tyler's text messages grew progressively more desperate and angry as his graduation ceremony deadline approached. 6:48 a.m. The ceremony fee payment failed. They're giving my slot to someone else. 7:03 a.m. This is destroying my career before it even starts. How could you do this to me? 7:16 a.m. Mom is crying and Dad looks like he might have a heart attack. Are you happy now? Emma's voicemails detailed the collapse of her carefully planned interview strategy. "Alicia, my interview is Monday and I have nothing professional to wear. The Nordstrom payment was declined and now my credit card is maxed out. This job could have changed my entire life. You've ruined everything." But the most revealing responses came from extended family members who'd received my documentation email and were now calling Barbara, demanding explanations about the financial arrangements I described. Aunt Linda left a voicemail that was simultaneously supportive of me and furious with Barbara. "Honey, I just read your email and I'm horrified by how your mother has been treating you. I had no idea you'd been supporting them financially. Barbara has been telling everyone that she was struggling to help you get back on your feet. I'm so sorry we didn't know what was really happening. Uncle Marcus called twice once to offer me genuine support and wants to express his anger about Barbara's deception. Alicia, if you need somewhere to stay while you rebuild after the fire, we have a guest room that's yours as long as you need it. I'm also calling to tell you that I'm disgusted by what I learned about Frank's role in this situation. Your aunt and I want to help you however we can. The offer of family support based on genuine care rather than financial obligation felt foreign after years of one-sided relationships with Barbara Tyler and Emma. Meanwhile, the practical consequences of ending my support were cascading through their household faster than they'd apparently anticipated. Frank's panicked text messages revealed how thoroughly his comfortable lifestyle had depended on my unknowing subsidies. Alicia, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my situation. I've been contributing to household expenses through property improvements and maintenance work. Maybe we could discuss a gradual transition that wouldn't disrupt everyone's stability so suddenly. Property improvements and maintenance work that had been funded by my contributions and performed on a house I'd helped save from foreclosure, generating income for Frank while increasing equity for Barbara. I understand you're upset about not being informed about certain financial arrangements, but cutting off all support without warning is causing serious hardship for people who were counting on your assistance. Serious hardship for people who'd been counting on my assistance while denying me basic help during my own crisis. But the most dramatic response came from Barbara herself, who called at 11:30 with a voice that alternated between rage and panic. Alicia, what you've done is evil, and pure evil. You've destroyed this family over a temporary disagreement about housing arrangements. Housing arrangements. My homelessness after a fire was being characterized as a minor disagreement rather than a genuine emergency that had revealed their true priorities. Tyler lost his graduation ceremony slot, and now potential employers will think he didn't complete his certification properly. Emma missed her interview because she couldn't afford appropriate clothes. Frank's business payments failed and he might lose important contracts. Every consequence was being attributed to my decision to stop enabling their financial dependence rather than their failure to plan for sustainable independence. And now the whole family knows private business that wasn't anyone else's concern. Linda and Marcus are lecturing me about family values and asking questions about Frank's background that are none of their business. Private business that had involved spending my money on Frank's failed ventures while portraying me as a previously irresponsible daughter who was finally contributing to family expenses. I hope you're satisfied with destroying everything we built together. Everything we built together. Barbara was claiming shared credit for a lifestyle that I had funded entirely through my own sacrifice and labor. But the most unexpected development was the professional opportunities that emerged from my LinkedIn post about financial family abuse, which I'd written as a way to process my emotions. But that had resonated with far more people than I'd anticipated. 3 different companies reached out with job opportunities after reading my post about establishing boundaries with manipulative family members. Apparently, my experience with financial exploitation had demonstrated qualities that employers valued: careful financial management, strong personal boundaries, and the courage to make difficult decisions when circumstances required change. TechFlow Solutions offered me a senior marketing position with 30% higher salary than my previous job. Innovate Boston invited me to interview for a director-level role that included stock options and a signing bonus. Creative Dynamics wanted to discuss a consulting arrangement that would provide flexibility while I rebuilt my personal life. The professional recognition felt validating in a way that my family's demands for financial support never had. These companies valued my skills, experience, and character rather than my bank account, and they were offering opportunities for growth rather than expectations for unlimited sacrifice. By evening, the contrast between my family's panicked demands and the genuine support from extended family and professional contacts was stark and illuminating. Barbara, Tyler, Emma, and Frank viewed me as a resource to be managed and maintained for their benefit. They were angry that I'd withdrawn access to my income and devastated that their comfortable lifestyle faced disruption. Aunt Linda, Uncle Marcus, and their children offered guest rooms, emotional support, and assistance rebuilding my life without expecting anything in return. The companies contacting me were offering opportunities for mutual benefit based on my professional value rather than my willingness to be exploited. The chaos unleashed by ending my financial support had revealed not only how dependent my family had become on my subsidies, but also how many people were willing to provide genuine help when they understood my situation honestly. For the first time in 5 years, I was surrounded by relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided obligation. 9 months after walking away from my family's financial exploitation, I stood in the living room of my beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge looking out at the Charles River, while sipping coffee from my own espresso machine. The contrast with my previous life felt almost surreal, but every day confirmed that prioritizing my own well-being had opened space for genuine happiness and authentic relationships. The senior marketing position at TechFlow Solutions had exceeded every expectation I'd had about professional growth and personal fulfillment. My salary had increased by 45%, but more importantly, I was working with colleagues who valued my ideas and respected my boundaries. The company culture encouraged work-life balance rather than demanding unlimited sacrifice, and my supervisor had become a genuine mentor rather than someone who took my contributions for granted. With my increased income and the absence of family financial obligations, I'd been able to save 6 months of emergency expenses, furnish my apartment with quality pieces I'd actually chosen myself, and build the kind of life I dreamed about during those years of eating generic groceries to afford Tyler's education and Emma's cosmetic procedures. But the most meaningful change was the relationships I developed with people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Aunt Linda had become the family connection I'd always hoped to have with Barbara, offering emotional support and practical wisdom without ever making demands or expecting financial compensation for her care. Uncle Marcus and his family included me in holidays and celebrations because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed my financial assistance. Their teenage children, my cousins Sarah and David, looked up to me as an example of independence and self-respect, rather than viewing me as a source of funding for their activities. Jessica and I had rebuilt our friendship on a foundation of honesty, rather than the careful budget management that had previously prevented me from participating in group activities. She'd been incredibly supportive during my transition to independence, and our relationship was now stronger than it had ever been during my years of financial obligation to family. I'd even started dating someone I'd met through work, a software developer named Andrew, who appreciated my financial independence and strong boundaries rather than seeing them as obstacles to overcome. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than need or obligation. The consequences for my former family had been swift and comprehensive, but ultimately healthy for everyone involved. Barbara had lost the house to foreclosure proceedings that began 4 months after my support ended. The mortgage payments I'd been covering for 3 years were impossible to maintain on her retail salary, especially without the additional household contributions I'd been providing. She'd been forced to move in with Frank's elderly mother in a cramped apartment that offered none of the privacy or comfort they'd enjoyed while living off my earnings. Frank had disappeared entirely when my financial support stopped flowing. His business ventures collapsed without access to my income, his tax obligations remained unmet, and his contribution to Barbara's life proved to be entirely dependent on the resources I'd been unknowingly providing. Barbara eventually admitted that Frank had been using her for housing and financial support rather than building a genuine romantic relationship. But this recognition came only after he'd moved on to exploit someone else's generosity. Tyler had been forced to complete his welding certification through traditional student loans and part-time employment, which had actually improved his work ethic and professional maturity significantly. Missing the expensive graduation ceremony had no impact on his job prospects, and he'd found steady employment with a manufacturing company that valued his technical skills over his networking connections. More importantly, Tyler had reached out to me 6 months after my financial cutoff to apologize for his behavior during my crisis and ask if we could rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. He'd recognized that, depending on my financial support, had prevented him from developing genuine independence and self-confidence, and he was grateful that ending my subsidies had forced him to grow up properly. "I never realized how much pressure I was putting on you," he'd said during our first coffee meeting in almost a year. "I was so focused on my own needs that I didn't think about what you were sacrificing to help me. That wasn't fair to either of us." Tyler's apology felt genuine because it came after he'd learned to support himself rather than before he'd lost access to my bank account. He was building his career through his own efforts now, and our relationship was developing into authentic sibling affection rather than one-sided financial obligation. Emma had initially struggled more with the transition to independence, primarily because she'd become accustomed to using my financial support for optional lifestyle expenses, rather than genuine necessities. She'd missed her dream job interview because of the wardrobe crisis, but had eventually found employment with a smaller company that paid less but offered room for advancement based on performance rather than appearance. Emma had not yet apologized for her behavior during my crisis, and she continued to blame me for ruining her opportunities rather than accepting responsibility for her financial dependence. However, she'd stopped contacting me with demands or requests, and I was content to let her process her resentment without my involvement. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and Emma's entitled attitude toward my earnings had revealed character issues that went beyond simple financial confusion. I wished her well, but I didn't miss the stress of managing her constant needs and demands. Barbara's response to losing my support had been the most dramatic and ultimately the most telling. She'd initially spent months trying to restore our previous arrangement through guilt manipulation and family pressure. But when those tactics failed, she'd become genuinely angry about my boundaries and independence. "You've become a completely different person," she'd complained during our last phone conversation. "You used to care about family." "I used to enable family dysfunction," I'd replied. "Now I care enough to require healthy relationships." Barbara had refused my conditions for rebuilding our relationship, which included ending her involvement with exploitative men like Frank, attending family therapy to address her manipulation tactics, and acknowledging the inappropriateness of her financial demands during my crisis. "I don't need therapy," she'd said indignantly. "I need a daughter who understands family loyalty." Family loyalty, in Barbara's definition, meant unlimited financial support without reciprocal care or basic human decency during emergencies. Since I was no longer willing to provide that kind of one-sided relationship, she'd chosen to maintain her victim narrative rather than examine her own behavior. I'd made peace with the possibility that Barbara and I might never have a healthy relationship. Some people were too invested in their patterns of exploitation to change even when those patterns destroyed their relationships with people who genuinely loved them. But the most rewarding development was the support I'd received from extended family and professional contacts who'd witnessed my journey from financial exploitation to genuine independence. My story had resonated with many people who'd experienced similar family dynamics, and I'd been invited to speak at several events about financial boundaries and family relationships. "You showed me that saying no to family demands isn't selfish," one woman had told me after a presentation at a local women's business group. "It's the most loving thing you can do when the relationship has become unhealthy." That perspective had become central to my understanding of family relationships and personal boundaries. Real love required mutual respect and consideration, not unlimited sacrifice from one person to enable comfort for others. As I stood in my apartment that Saturday morning reflecting on the transformation my life had undergone, since that night when my building caught fire, I felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had revealed the truth about my family relationships. Losing everything in the fire had been devastating, but it had also freed me from a system of financial abuse that had prevented me from building authentic happiness and genuine security. The people who truly cared about me had rallied to help during my emergency, while those who'd only valued my bank account had revealed their true priorities through their cruel response to my crisis. I'd learned that family wasn't defined by shared DNA or childhood history, but by mutual care, respect, and support during difficult times. Aunt Linda, Uncle Marcus Tyler after his growth period, Jessica Andrew, and my professional colleagues had become my chosen family because they valued me as a person rather than as a resource to be managed. The question I wanted to leave you with today is this: have you ever found yourself in a relationship where your value seemed tied to what you could provide rather than who you are as a person? And if so, what steps did you take to establish healthier boundaries? I hope my story helps anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics to recognize that saying no to exploitation isn't selfish. It's the foundation for building relationships based on genuine love and mutual respect. Please like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming difficult family situations and share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve relationships that celebrate who you are, not just what you can give. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.